Welcome to episode 1, creating generic cuboid families. When beginning a family, think of the LOD you may want your family to have. In this episode, I'll address 5 levels of a generic cuboid family. First, we'll have a non-parametric cuboid. Second, we'll have a parametric cuboid without reference planes. Third, we'll have a reference planes and instance-based parameters cuboid. Fourth, convert those to a type-based parameter. And last, the 5th family will have some voids just to give it a little bit of complexity. This is the project environment that I'll be starting with. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new generic model family. So I'll go up to the File tab, create new, go down to the generic model family. Without any hosting, I'll just choose the out-of-the-box family component. Since the goal here is not to include any parameters or information about the geometry, I'll start by creating a rectangle sketch. I'll change the width here to 4 feet by 4 feet. And I'll move the center of the new cuboid to the intersection of the default 2 reference planes. I'll close the sketch. If I take a look at the default extension, the height of the new geometry, you'll see that it's going to default to 1 foot. I can actually change this value to 4 feet or by 8 feet, and then I can load it into the project. You can see the origin of the family is the intersection of the 2 reference planes. Because those are strong references, I can align them to each other or to other objects. I'll name this family generic LOD 000. And I'll name the family type component. And our first family is complete. All right. And now from here, we'll go back into the family. Effectively, what you're seeing here is this model component can't really do much. Now, it keeps all of the important information that you might want to use, like the generic model visibility overrides, right? Like I can turn this on and off, and it's going to do that. I can work with filters for generic models. I can, turn things to wireframe or shaded, right? So I can still work with it. It's just a very generic basic family. So here, now I want to create something that's a basic rectangular parametric family. Let's do something that's very, very basic. And I'm just going to take these guys and make them equal. And these guys here. Okay, so let's give this guy a parameter. These are very basic parameters at this point. It's a very rudimentary family. So I'm going to give this guy, let's call it width. And let's just make it an instance. Call this one depth. And we can make this an instance. And then I'm going to close it out. And then what I can do is just take this guy, give it a height, and say I'm going to make this a height. And then give this an instance. Okay. So this guy is still unnamed, so I'm just going to load it back in. It's Just gonna give me a second. And you can see, hey, it's a basic family. It's just doing what I want it to do. I can also sort of align the center to centers. But the way that it's different is now I can start to change some of the parameters here. So I can change the width, the depth, and the height. So let's call this one generic LOD 150, maybe, right? I mean, it's so basic. And I'll also call this the component of this. Cube, rectangle could be changed based on the instance. So let's say I have, 3 of them. So this one's going to be a width of 4. This one's going to be a width of 2. This one's going to be a width of 8. Right? Now it's kind of interesting to just grab these and change their heights. I can select all instances of them, and I can change all of their width values right here. However, one thing that I can't do is sort of graphically interact with this. So one thing that we can do is give it the ability to stretch with little handles. And the way that we do that is with something called reference planes. So I'm going to keep this same family. I'm going to delete this guy. You can see that we have our parameters already made. I'm going to reorganize them because I like to go with depth height as far as the structure of my parameters. I'm going to give some reference planes here. Right, so I could just start sketching these reference planes. I don't have to take time to name them. I can just start sketching them and get a sense of what I'm going to look at. So here, I could do naming now. So I could do left. And I could do right. Left, right, front, and back is different based on the family category. So I'm not going to get into that here, but that's definitely something to pay attention to in the future. This guy is back. So I'll try to keep the same naming convention. Instead of like rear, I'll call it back. Okay. And now in the front, I'll just create a reference plane here and call this top. All right, now I'm going to give it some parameters. I'm going to give it the same basic layout that we had before, which was making it equal on all sides. And then giving an overall parameter. And then same thing here. So this guy is just going to get the height. Boom. You can see it already changed. And then here I'm going to give this one width. And it's going to change. And this one's going to get a depth. Boom. So now let's create an extrusion. Now, the great thing is once I have these reference planes created, I can sort of draw it based on the intersections of these reference planes, and then I can automatically lock them. So that's a neat little trick. And then I'm going to align this to here, the reference plane down to the object, or locking the object up to the reference plane. And then while I'm here, I'm just going to take a moment to flex it. So I'm just going to allow it to grow and shrink based on the parameters that I give it. So let's say this is going to be 8 feet, 8, 8, 8 feet. And then this is going to be 3. Sometimes I like to go directions sort of higher and lower, just to see if it breaks. Let's see, that's a 4, and then that's a 12. Cool. So it's all working. It's doing a fairly good job. So now we have a series of instance-based parameters, and we have the ability to change their parameters graphically. So instead of having this one here where you type in the parameters here, we now have the ability to type them in to a round number if we want, but we can also stretch them. We can also play with them a little. So if I go to, have the ability to change the grips. All right, so now we have a fairly basic component. I'm going to call this generic LOD175. These numbers don't mean everything. And then I'm going to go into the family again. And I'm going to make these type-based. So let's just change these. And then I'm going to load them in. So again, we have our very basic family here. We're able to align it based on the reference planes of the center line. And I'm going to call this generic LOD 190. It's not quite 200. And then here, one of the benefits that we have here now that it's type-based is we can actually edit the qualities or parametric values of this for each type. So if I'm in here, let's say I'm going to give this one 6 by 6 by 12, right? I can name this 6 by 6 by 12. And now I can duplicate this and I can call it 8 by 8 by 14. And 8 by 8 by 14. Now we can see the differences. Now I can select this and say select all instances in the entire project. It's only going to select that type, okay? But if I select all of the instances on this project, it'll get all of the values because it's the same type, even though they vary in their qualities. So let's go back to our project, our family. I'm going to create another reference plane. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to tab through and get that, tab through and get that. I'm going to change the scale a little bit. And I'm going to call this a inset width, type-based parameter, and this guy is going to be inset depth. Now let's take a look at our parameters here. You see that they're now risen to the top. These two aren't as important to me, so I'm going to drop them down. I'm going to keep width above depth. And I'll change this to 2 feet and this to 1 foot. Now, one thing that I can do is I can edit this and I can pick these new lines and lock them. And then I'm going to trim the boundary. However, that's going to change it for the full height. So I'm going to mirror these. I'm going to call this one the same inset depth. And then what I'm going to do is create a void. So I'm going to create a void. I'm going to, again, use the clicking from the inside of that reference plane. I'm going to lock everything down. so it stays with that reference plane. And then boom. Actually, let me edit this. I will select this. I will unlock it. And then I'm going to align to this face, remove any constraints, lock, hit OK. So now if I go to this right view here, this right elevation, you should see two insets here. One that's full height, and then one that's partial height. I'm going to create a reference plane here, and I will make this half height. So I'll select this, make it equal. Let's call this one middle height. I can change this plane to a named plane called middle height. And then I'm going to align this top there. So now if we take a look at it, two voids. We have one that carries the full height of that profile, and then one here that's a little more parametric, and we can change the height. I'm sorry, we can graphically represent the height differently. Rather than being full height, we can give it a value. So now I'm going to load it in. And now here we have a family with a different representation. Now if you recall, the representation of this void here is 1/2 the height. In this case, it's going to be 6 feet. And you'll see that this one here is not showing because we have a view depth with a cut of about 4 feet. So let's change that to 7, and we should have it show up. I'm going to name this generic LOD, and this one could start to become a 200. And then here we'll name this we'll say that this is 6 by 6 by 12. Copy, paste. And this is a representation of some basic family geometries. So this concludes the tutorial for the day. Thank you.